In this video, we'll be creating components for button. So let's get started. First, I'll type the word say button. I'll give this 16. The next thing I will do here is to convert this into an auto layout. Shift A. And I can expand this. I'll give it a fill and probably this color right here. I'll change this to white. I'll give the width of my button 342 and the height, let's say 52. And probably give it a corner radius of 20. Now this is my button. This is what the base button looks like, or the default button. This is what it looks like. I want to create another variation of this button. Let's say the hover state. So hover state, the button color might be lighter or darker than this. So let's duplicate this guy and let's make this button a little bit lighter. Maybe something like this. Or let's make this a bit darker than this. So maybe this dark and this one something like this. Alright. And I want to create another version, which is the disabled state or disabled version, whereby the button is inactive at that point. That's something. Okay. Let's give this color. And let's make this a bit. Alright. So we have this to be the default, we have this to be the hover state, and this one to be the disabled state. Now these are just three separate buttons. What I will do is from this one I will rename this one to default. I'll change this one to hover, and I'll change this one to disabled. Alright. Now these are not components yet. Remember in the previous video we created the default input feed. Then we now started adding variants. But this one we've already created the variant. All we need to do now is to combine everything into a single component. How do you do that? I'll select the three together, then I'll click on this drop down here and I will see create component sets. This is a different approach whereby you've created all the different variants and what you are doing is just grouping them together into a component. So what I'll do is I'll say create component sets. Now my component will be created. If I move this out, you will see the 42 diamond shape here. So now these together are in a component. I can change this one to button. Alright. Now, like we said, this is the default. If we check our property now, we see this is default, this is hover, this is disabled. The name we give the frames before we converted them into a component set. Now, this property one, I don't want it to be property one. I can rename it from property one to say maybe state. So instead of having property one, what I will do is just click on it, change from property one to state. Alright, so now when I click on this button, the state, this is the default state, this is the hover state, and this is the disabled state. Now, how does hover works? Hover works when you hover your mouse cursor over the button to sort of show that, oh, this button is clickable and stuff. And how do you make that happen? This is what you're going to do. You're going to go to this prototype tab, click on prototype, select this button here. When you select over this button, you see all these little circles with plus inside of them. Just click any of them and drag to the second one here. Now you will see these interactions here. We have different options here. We have the trigger, we have the action, we have the states, and you have animation. So trigger simply means what do you do to this button for it to change to this. So now our trigger is not when you click, as trigger is when you hover, right? Now what you are going to look for hover. This is it, while hovering. So what we are saying is while hovering on this button, change to this. So now our action is already our action is when this trigger has been triggered, or when this trigger has been performed, what happens next? This is the action, and the action is change to So now change to, then to this hover. You can see it's quite straightforward. If you want it to, while hovering, if you want it to change to the disabled state, change it to disabled, and you will see that your arrow moved from this default to this what's it called, to this disabled state. And if you don't want to use defaults for your state, you can change this one to active. All right. So let's go back to our prototype. We have to switch the prototype. So what we're saying is, while hovering on this active state, currently say disabled. That's not what we want. You want it to change to hover. And now this animation is the process of changing to the other button. How do you want it to happen? What's the animation? Do you want it to be instant? Do you want it to dissolve? Do you want it to smart animate? So this is what this is all about. So let's just switch. Let's just stick with instant, and let's see what we have. Let's close this. Let's come back to design. Now, next thing is I have this design here. Let me bring this one back here. And what I want to do is to replace this button here. So I can just move this one away and copy. Like I said, you can just copy one of your buttons and paste it in this frame, or you can drag and press Alt to duplicate that and bring this one here in one box. So now the next thing I want to do is make my button from this end to this edge here. Now, remember from my component, I'd already prototyped it in such a way that when you hover on this button, it should change to this. Now let's preview this page and see if that really works. All right, so now that we have our design on the screen, when I hover over this button, you can see how it changed to that lighter version. You can see that means it works. Let's go back to our design. Can delete this one. But the way design works for some platform, this button right here, since the user have not provided all these details, this button will probably be inactive, or let's say disabled, until the user fill all of this information. So before the user actually provide all of these details, we want to keep the button inactive or disabled. Then after they provided all of this, we can then say, okay, let's give them the active states. All right. So let's move further with this. I want to do something. Let's expand this. Press Control and expand this guy. I want to introduce another type of button. Let's say we have this button, this black button, as the primary button. I want to introduce another button called the secondary button. I'll move this one here. And this is also an active state. It's going to be active, but it's just a secondary button. Let's say it's going to have like a color like this. Let's say very light. Okay, let me just. It's going to have this button. This is our secondary button. And also, I want to give it an overstate. Maybe I'll just duplicate this one or this one. I'll just duplicate this one too. I'll move it this way. Make this one a bit lighter since the overstate. Something like this. And also this one. So the what's it called? The inactive state or the disabled state for the two of them is going to look the same. We have two types of buttons. We have the primary button and we have the secondary button. For each of them, for each of the primary and the secondary button, we have active. This is the active for this. This is the active for this. So under state, this one also should be active. So let's change this one to active. So now see what happens when you change this one to active. You have this like error. The properties and values of these variants are conflicting. What that means is we have one active here and we have another active. We should not be having two active buttons. So now we need to introduce another property that will be able to specify that this active is for the primary button and this active here is for the secondary button. All right, let me change this one to say active 2 so that error message can go away. Now let's introduce the new property, which is the button type, right? So what we'll do is click on this plus here. Make sure that this component is selected. Click on this plus, you see variant, select variant, and you see name. Instead of property, we see type. We can leave this default for now, and we can also change it to say primary. Then we select dates. Now, for this one, now we can see the states, we can see the type. The type is primary, the state is active. For this one, the type is primary, the state is hover. For this one, the type is primary, the state is disabled. So for this one, so it's still showing the type is still showing primary. So let's change this primary to secondary. So what we are going to do is add a new type. So what's the name? Let's call it secondary. Now we can now change this one from active to active. You see, we don't have that error message again. So this active is for secondary, and this one now is hover. So instead of state 5, we'll have to change. So let's change the type first. Let's change the type to secondary, and let's change this one to hover. This one too, let's change it to, since we had already created secondary before, so there's no need to be creating it again. Once you create any item, it's going to remain there. So let's change this one to secondary, and let's change this one to disabled. Alright. Now I can go back to my buttons here. All the changes I've made here is already applied here. So instead of saying the type I want, I can switch to secondary. So secondary active. And if I go back to my preview, let me reload. Okay, now if I hover over this one, is showing this black, which is not supposed to be. It's supposed to be showing me this light version. So what's happening? Let me go back to my prototype and see. So what I have now is, for this my secondary active, you see where the prototype is linked to this one. All I have to just do is click on this arrow and drag it to this one here. Right now, we don't need this one. We don't need this one to go to this one. So once you want to remove something, just drag it away. Now let's go back to our design. You see when you overwrite, it's giving you the light version. So guys, that's how you create components for buttons. Let me change this back to the black version, primary, and you can make it disabled. So guys, that's how you create button components. I hope this was helpful. There's more you can do with button, right? You can still create the one that have icon beside it and stuff, but this is just the basic, this is just the foundation. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.